A few weeks ago, I released my Star Fox 64 is not a remake video. I noticed a theme in the comments of the videos disagreeing with one of the points I'd made. It was that Star Fox 64 3D was a remaster and not a remake. Most of the comments said that while the game had new graphics and voice work, the game shared the same source code as Star Fox 64. Seeing as I'm pretty ignorant on the development of Star Fox 64 3D, and a lot of comments had acted like this was common knowledge, I gave them the benefit of the doubt and moved on with my life. For a while, that is. This actually spiked my curiosity on if Star Fox 3D was a remake or a remaster. So I decided to look into it. For those of you who didn't watch the video, my points are this. A remake is when a video game is made from the ground up to try to capture the original feeling of the original game, but update things like graphics and voice lines. Look at Resident Evil Remake and the Mario All-Star Collection for an example of this. A reimagining is when the game is rebuilt from the ground up, but it's trying to capture the feeling of the original game, but it's not confined to the original design philosophies of the original game. The example that I used was the Resident Evil 2 remake, being a very different game from the original Resident Evil 2.
Ada, wait!
I didn't make this point very clear in my original video, but a reboot and a reimagining could almost be used interchangeably. They're practically the same thing, especially in the gaming industry. And a remaster is where they remake a game, but they usually use the same assets, code, and voice recordings. They usually just upscale it from like 1080p to 4K, is the example I gave. But it usually has many, if not all, of the same assets from the original game. To back up this point, the original term remaster and master comes from audio recordings. Mastering it would be to transfer it essentially to a different medium, cassette, vinyl. If I'm understanding this correctly, I'm not an audio guy, but they wouldn't use different recordings. They would take the assets that were already there and just optimize it for a different medium. And I think you could transfer that over to video games, saying like, oh, this is made for the PS4. Well, we're going to optimize it for the PS5. So many of the fine commenters pointed out that they felt that Star Fox 64 3D was a remaster that used the original source code of Star Fox 64, but made graphics and voiceover and music from the ground up. In the example I gave for a remaster, I used Insomniac's Spider-Man and the Spider-Man remaster. And a point for the Star Fox 3D being a remaster is they did change some of the graphics. They gave Peter Parker a downgrade. So I was ready to concede this point, but I decided to do just a little bit of research to see for myself. Now it's time to answer that question once and for all. Is Star Fox 64 3D a remake or a remaster? It's a remake. Okay, I'm going to show you how I arrived to this conclusion, and you can feel free to disagree with me in the comments below. First of all, source code. A lot of the comments that said Star Fox 3D was a remaster pointed out that it shared the same source code as Star Fox 64. And I thought if this is true, then I could at least see that this game could be considered a remaster. I'm not a programmer and I have very limited computer knowledge, so I had to figure out what source code even means. And as far as I could figure out with my very limited knowledge on coding, source code is the human readable set of instructions that programmers write to tell the computer how to create and run the game. You see, computers speak a different language than we do. They speak something called binary, which is ones and zeros, essentially a bunch of yeses or nos. And out of all these combinations of yeses and nos, or ones and zeros, tells the computer what to do. And seeing as we are not NASA engineers from the 1960s, programmers have thought of better ways to communicate with a computer. And we are 3 or 4 iterations away from binary. Look, I'm going to leave a link to a video that explained it to me. Basics Explained, H3 VTux, because he does a far better job than I could ever do. So, in other words, imagine a video game is a great, big, moist cake. You know, like the one you get at the end of Mario 64, and not the one at the end of Portal. The source code is a complete recipe that the chefs, programmers, use to make the cake. Every single step, ingredient, timing, secret techniques written down in detail. It tells the computer exactly what the game should look like, how the controls should work, what happens when you press a button, how enemies behave, how physics and collision work, the music levels, everything. How do I know that the designers did not use the source code to make Star Fox 64 3D, and they built it from the ground up? They told us.
Hey, I'm Morgan Ritchie of Nintendo of America, and I'm here today to talk about Star Fox 64 3D, a brand new remastered Nintendo classic that's going to be released exclusively for the Nintendo 3DS on September 9th. A brand new remastered...
Oh, wait. Did he say remaster?
I'm no match for you. I admit defeat.
Are you gonna listen to that monkey?
You're not as stupid as you look.
Yeah, he didn't use the right term here. This is an interview with the actual designers of the game. These interviews are called Iwata Asks. Here's what Miyamoto said. So I wanted to make a game for the Nintendo 3DS system, but making a completely new Star Fox game would take 3 years to complete. I see that's a good strategy. Well, to everyone out there, a game from 14 years ago has been remade for the Nintendo 3DS. But as I listen to you talk, I don't feel like it's a remake for an old game, as can be said for the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D. This isn't a remake. Hold on. We didn't use emulators, and this isn't a port. It has been born anew. Yes, it is a rebirth. We paid a lot of attention to redoing the graphics for explosions, for instance. Yes, you remade everything. It's like the phoenix that plunges into the sea of fire, only to rise again. But the title, Star Fox 64, Phoenix wouldn't make much sense. It's a handcrafted copy using today's technology. For some context in this interview, they are comparing Star Fox 64 3D to the Ocarina of Time 3D that had come out sometime before this game. If you go back to that Iwata Ask, they talk about receiving the source code for Ocarina of Time. Well, when I received the old program, I thought that all of the creators must have been in high spirits. In the comment box of the source program, someone had written something like, "We got an extension. I'm worried about my bonus, but at least now we can make this." There's some really great insights from the developers in those interviews, and I really actually recommend checking them out if you're any kind of a Nintendo junkie. If you go through the Star Fox Iwata Ask, you will not find any mention of getting the original code for the game. And I was wondering, how would the original source code work on a different console? That's something I'm not sure if that's even a point against it. Some of you programmers will have to let me know in the comments. Usually whenever they port over a video game, especially like from a console to a PC, they have to have the video game running on an emulator, which is another can of worms. There's even a point in the Ocarina of Time interview where they mentioned that they had to redo the Z-targeting reticle because it worked on a 2D plane, but not a 3D plane. Going back to my cake analogy, Ocarina of Time 3D, they basically took the original recipe, improved it, better ingredients, new tools, and some updated instructions. With Star Fox 3D, they wrote a brand new recipe from scratch that tries to recreate the same taste and texture as the original cake. So no, Star Fox 64 3D does not use the same source code as Star Fox 64. And even cases like Ocarina of Time 3D, where they heavily relied on the original source code, I would still put that in remake territory. Just less of a remake than the Star Fox 64 3D remake. Anyway, that's going to about do it for today. Please let me know if you disagree with me in the comments. I love these kind of discussions. Until next time, take the initiative and roll out.